Tonight, our main speaker is Lee. Help me welcome Lee.
Okay, first of all, can you all hear me? Back there? Okay, great. My name is Lee, and I am an alcoholic. My sobriety date is somewhere between April 13th and April 17th, and I don't know. So I decided on April 15th because I got to pay my taxes that day, and I might as well just. So that my sobriety date is April 15th, 1989. I don't need a clap for that. You know what? It's just one day at a time. A little housekeeping here right now. Usually I would take my cap off when I'm speaking. However, I had gotten a fight with a hatch part of my hatchback this morning. It was coming down and I was going up, and I cracked my crown. You wouldn't, and it didn't stop bleeding for about 5 hours. I got big bandages all over it. So anyway, I'm an alcoholic. What happened? Oh, that's the microphone there, right? No? Did I touch something wrong? I got it. Okay. All these people from Chino Valley are here not because they wanted to hear me talk, but they're here to keep me honest. Because I will go off on and I have a little reminder sheet here too, the things I want to discuss. And the first thing I want to discuss is the fact that Alcoholics Anonymous has made me into a human being. Does that make sense? Because I wasn't. Interestingly enough, I never started drinking until I was 23. So I apparently missed out on about 10 years of good times. I don't know. But anyway, I'm here tonight hoping, just praying that one person in this room will hear something, even if it's crazy, something that might help them stay sober for one more day. Just one more day, because that 1989 crap means nothing if you're not living life. I think that I relate very much to all you people that came here in a van, because I was in 6 treatment centers, 6 28-day programs, and I'll get to that in a minute. The other thing I want to say before I start telling you about my story, and that is, my sponsor tells me I talk too much about the trucking business and not enough about sobriety, so I told him not to come. So, on page 83, prior to the chapter on the promises, okay? And this is in the context of making amends. But when I read this years ago, I thought, my God, this is what happened to me. And these 2 sentences say, we should be sensible, tactful, considerate, and humble without being servile or scraping. As God's people, we stand on our own feet. We don't crawl before anyone. And I'd like to ask how many of you in here, when you were first coming into this program, felt less than? Your tail was between your legs? I'm a piece of crap. I can't stop drinking or drugging. I can't. And to me, those 2 sentences, even though they were in a context of making amends, was like a light bulb to me. It went off. And I copied that down on one of these little 3x5 cards or whatever I had at the time, put it under the glass on my desk, and have stared at that little card for 30 years. Because I absolutely believe that when I walked through the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous, I was scared, man. I was scared of what I might do. I was afraid of what I had done. I was broken. And as it says in the big book, I was absolutely bankrupt. So, a little bit about what it was like. You know, we all hear these stories about, yeah, I'm a normal family, everything. My family wasn't normal. We're crazy. There were 7 kids in my family, and each one of us hated each other. Now, that's horrible, you know. I mean, I'm sisters backstabbing sisters, brothers doing this, you know. At any rate, somehow I made it through that and made it through high school. Oh, yeah, I got kicked out of the 4th grade at one time, and I got fired from being an altar boy. But other than that, I wasn't too bad. One quick story I'll tell you is that when I was in the 4th grade, I was going to a place called the Elmwood Elementary School in West Hartford, Connecticut. And somehow the teacher, I think I was in the 3rd grade or something, we lived a block away from the school. The teacher heard wind that the boys were going to beat the shit out of me after class. So she arranged for me to leave class 15 minutes early. And so I go home. Now, you know what? I must have been a real badass when I was in that grade. I think it's the 4th grade. Because every boy in my class followed and went down the street and came knocking on the door and asked my mother if I could come out and play. So, you know, my thinking about that is, boy, if you're going to do it upright. You know, you don't want 1 or 2 kids coming to your door. You want someone to come to the door where you got to call the police, you know, something like that. Okay, made it through high school, and in the summer of the year I graduated, I had been accepted at a couple. I'm trying to make sure I'm getting across here. I had been accepted at a few colleges, and my father informed me in June that there was no money left, that he couldn't pay for my college. So if I wanted it, I had to earn it. It was a little disappointing, but you know, when you're 18 years old, you're full of piss and vinegar. I'll show you. I'll get myself through college, and I did. I got a job with an oil distribution company back in New England, where they use a lot of heating oil and stuff like that. And I got a job, and this man became my first mentor. His name was Bill Sandry, and he gave me a job painting gas stations. And on my 18th birthday, they sent a dispatcher out to wherever I was painting gas stations, and he says, "Get in the car, kid." I said, "Why?" "Because today's your birthday, right?" "Yeah." "You're a truck driver now." And that's what happened, and this is what started my whole career. I got that job. I started delivering oil, and then later on, when I was about 20, we didn't have any restrictions on age in those days, so they put me in a tractor trailer and a tanker and went into Boston or into Hartford, pick up loads of gasoline or fuel or diesel oil, and work your ass off in 2 or 3. You know, everybody worked at night in those days. You know, I always drove at night. So you know what? I did that, and Bill Sandry had an in with a place in Deerfield Academy, which is a preparatory school in New England, and together, the headmaster of Deerfield Academy and Bill Sandry got me into a place called Worcester Academy, which was about 75 miles away from my home. You know what? I made it through there. I don't know how, but I finally got accepted at Northeastern University, and Bill Sandry said to me, he called me in the office, he says, "I know that your first year at Northeastern, you have to stay your sophomore year. You can't, but it's a work-study program, one of the first in the country, where you would study for 10 weeks and you'd work for 10 weeks. First co-op job they gave me was cost accounting nuts and bolts in a factory, because I was in business administration major. And so I did that, and they paid me $50 a week. Well, if you do the math, 10 weeks at $50 a week ain't going to pay my tuition. So I kind of sort of told they called him the career counselor. I called him an asshole. But I sort of told him that I can't make it. And so I went back to Bill Sandry, and he says, "As long as you are in college, you have a job." So that's what I did for 10 weeks. When I studied for 10 weeks and I worked for 10 weeks, and I got myself through college that way. And I tell you what, folks, it wasn't easy, and I wasn't a drunk then. You know, I couldn't belong to a fraternity because when I was in college, I had to hitchhike home to Greenfield, pick up a tractor trailer, go down to Boston, pick up a load, come back, work on delivering oil around town the next day on Saturday, and on Sunday I worked in one of the gas stations. Now, this doesn't make me a hero. This makes me poor, and that's why I did it. So after college, I screwed around for a couple of years in real estate and insurance, but my insurance broker, the district agent, came up to me one day. We all went out to lunch, you know, and we're going around a traffic circle, and everybody's saying, "Wow, look at that truck, look at that." And so I started describing everything on it. This is air brakes, this is blah, 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 blah. And the guys, so my district manager came up to me and he said, "You know, you're doing a good job selling insurance, but I don't think you really like it." Now, I don't know if he was trying to get rid of me or not, because I did a good job selling insurance, made a good living doing it. But it wasn't my future. And he was right. And about a month later, I quit selling real estate and insurance, and I got a job with the fourth largest carrier in this country at the time. And I learned so much. What I did learn, too, is eventually, after a couple of years of training, eventually they had me open up a terminal in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, and then I took over their Albany, New York operation. And I tell you this because during that period of time, my district manager was from Secaucus, New Jersey, or someplace like that. And he'd come up, and one of the things he taught me was, when you're dealing with a business agent from the Teamsters, you deny everything. Always leave yourself an out, and never get backed in a corner. Now, folks, I want to ask you something. Doesn't that sound like an alcoholic? You deny everything, you leave yourself an out, and try not to get backed in a corner. Well, I learned the hard way. And I ended up opening up that terminal in Pittsfield, and I ended up getting promoted to Albany, New York. But during that time, I got married to this woman. My first wife ran off with my partner. I had started up a little trucking business before that, and that's another story I don't want to bore you with. But at any rate, I tried it a second time, and, I had a good life. And the metaphorical house with the picket fence in Dalton, Massachusetts, which is where all of the paper for our money is made, in Dalton, Massachusetts. And 2 kids. They used to call it a rich man's family. And I had a girl and a boy. Unfortunately, and this is only to give you a reason, or not even a reason. I was an alcoholic, but I didn't know it. I always felt inferior, so I have bravado. But my company that I worked for required me I was an operations manager, but I was required to have at least 3 lunches with customers, okay? And twice a month, take them and their wives out to dinner. Well, if that isn't a setup for becoming an alcoholic, I don't know what. Where you require, well, I got to drink, I got to drink. So I'm like 25, 26 or something like that, and I'm picking up the habit of having a glass of wine with lunch, and nobody can say anything about it, Or I'd throw these big parties at my house for all my LTL customers. And the local liquor store was a neighbor of mine, and he says to me, "Here's what we'll do." He says, "I'll bring out all the booze you need, or we think you need, and anything that isn't cracked, I'll take back, if the seal's not cracked." So guess what? Cases and cases of booze come to my house, and when everybody goes home at 4 o'clock in the morning, I go around cracking all the seals. So I have a pretty good supply. And, of course, my company paid for everything, so who cared? and I don't want to get off the track here too much, so just to let you know that what happened, and this is the what happened part. Well, what happened was, after my son was born, my wife's doctor told her she cannot have any more kids. So I did the bullshit noble thing, and I got a vasectomy. See, because I didn't want her to go through all that pain. And 2.5 years later, she ended up pregnant. Can you imagine that? Yeah. And I said, who's the father? I know, she didn't even come home to talk to me about it. She called me from her mama's house 50 miles away. And by the way, folks, I am not blaming my ex-wife for any of my alcoholism, because my coper was broken. I couldn't cope. She called me up to let me know that, and I won't go into details, but basically I went to my bar in the house, you know, one where all those crack bottles were, and I poured myself a double scotch. I was there with the kids, and by that time I had been promoted to Albany, New York, and I was driving back and forth from Pittsfield to Albany, and I had taken the babysitter home when she called to tell me all of this, and I said, you better come home. She said, no, I'm going to stay down here with my mother. Okay. I went to my bar. I poured myself a couple of scotches. I drunk myself to sleep night. And folks, I didn't sober up for 10 years. I really took that hard. Now, once again, I'm not blaming her. The point is that I couldn't cope with the situation. You know, I just not want to. I could forgive, but I couldn't forget, or something like that, or I could forget, but I couldn't forgive. I don't know. But the point is that I went off the rails. I went off the rails, and I remember the very next day going out with my salesman, because I just couldn't sit in the office and be alone, you know. Going out with him, but that didn't work very well either, because all I did was cry all the time I was with him. We didn't make any sales calls. So, you know, the point is that I went from that point to becoming an alcoholic immediately. And like that night, the next day I was drinking alcoholically. I was most likely already had enough in me, so there was just a little, and over I went. I was fortunate enough to, I don't know how, but I got promoted again, and I got sent out to Kankakee, Illinois. And this is a part of my story, because this is where my drinking really went crazy. I got out there, you know, obviously, I tried to stay together. We tried to stay together for 2 years. It didn't work, so I took this promotion out to Kankakee to open up a trucking terminal for my company. And, of course, I'm living in a hotel, and our sustenance was, first of all, our attitude was work hard, play hard, and most everybody that was in the management team were staying at the Holiday Inn. And McLean was a Southern company, so I picked up a hell of a drawl, but I try not to get into that. But I was free, white, and 21. There was an awful scene when my wife came out with my 2 children, and there was a scene at the office, and had to call a sheriff and have to have her removed from the premises. So that made me drink more, you know. Okay, so after about 1.5 years of that, I went off the deep end, and finally my boss, who drank more than I did, had to come out and say to me, look, we'd like to keep you, but we can't, so we're going to give you an opportunity to resign with some benefits. So I did. And a couple of my brothers came and scooped me up and brought me back to Massachusetts. And here's where my connection with you guys is. I was too sick to stay in the detox and get sober. They had to put me in a hospital. And after 10 days, I went into a place called the Brattleboro Retreat. Now, it's like some of these places y'all have around here. And we would have to take the bus to AA meetings and stuff like that. But I went into the Brattleboro retreat, and I really didn't have a clue what was going on. I just said to myself, okay, I got a problem with alcohol. Yeah. You know, I figured I was going to go back to work out in Kankakee when I was done, but that didn't happen, of course. So during my recovery, I was in 6 28-day programs. By the way, I didn't get sober for about 10 years after I went into that first treatment center. I was so serious about it that when I got out that day, on the 28th day, I had my car there, and I drove right to the Vermont State Liquor Store and picked up a fifth. Now, you kids don't know what a fifth is, do you? Yeah. It's a little bit bigger than a liter. But anyway, I went there and I said, like a good alcoholic, I said, I'll tell you what, I was going to get a pint, but they were on sale. I could get a whole fifth for, check this out, $3.95. Woo! So I said, okay, I'm only going to drink half of this today, and I'll drink half of it tomorrow. Now, this is kind of an irony because I had to go 20 miles, and I made it back. Oh, I'm 40 years old now, right? And I'm sleeping at my parents' house. that really worked well. So I made it down to my parents' house, and there was about that much left in that bottle. You know, I have such tolerance for alcohol that even after spending 28 days out from drinking, that I actually could drink almost a whole fifth and not even have it affect me. That's scary. Okay, so we got time for me to talk to you newcomers, and congratulations for your 30 days. You chip takers. It is so important that you understand a few things about this program. And you know, you may not catch on to it the first time. I hope you do. I hope you do. You won't have to go through 10 years of bitter hell like I did, or many of us in here, I'm sure. But the fact is that when I went into my last treatment center in a place called Keene, New Hampshire, I was told the next day by my shrink that my blood alcohol level when I checked in was a .34. And that I had carried on a conversation in the ER with the nurses, and the worst part about it is I remembered it. That's the tolerance I had for alcohol. So a couple of good things happened to me. When I got out of there, it was on a Monday, and I was in Keene, New Hampshire. I was at a stoplight, and this truck went by, and it said on it, BDR Transport, Vermont to California. I thought, whoa, that's what I need. I need to get to California, right? Still thinking alcoholically. But for some reason, when I found out about that .34 blood alcohol level, I got on my knees. I asked God, please help me. Only this time, I meant it. I didn't have a major catastrophe. I'm the one who checked into the place. I wasn't brought there. And he did. He answered my prayers, because when that truck went by, that was a Monday. On Friday, I was sitting, my second mentor, I was sitting in his office, the man who owned BDR Transport. He was 84 years old. He started the business when he was 60. And he hired me on the spot. Scared the crap out of me. Oh, I knew everything about what I needed to know about trucking. I didn't know shit what I needed to know about dealing with people. And he asked me to go into sales. Yeah, I hated sales because I had to talk to people. I liked it a lot better when I could run things on the dock and run trucks here and run trucks there and do that. So he got me that job. God got me that job. And when that happened, I knew then that I would never, ever be able to drink and live the life I want to live. So I flew into it, I didn't know it was temporary at the time. Got a sponsor in Keene. 30 days after I worked for Mr. Withington at BDR Transport, he called me in the office and he said, "Hey, I'd like to have you do me a favor," because I had a lot of operational experience in trucking. He asked me if I'd go to California and open up a terminal for him. And he says, "I'll give you some time to think about it. Let me know tomorrow." Well, I didn't have to do that because I was standing right there. He told me what he was going to give me, company car, which I'd always had before, but company car, I'm going to get huge raise in pay, and I'm going to go out there and I'm going to set up a trucking terminal for him. And I was gone. On September 9th, I flew out there. I didn't know a soul. Interesting. I did not know a soul. He had a little two-door operation down near LAX. I went down there and I saw this big scraggly guy. He had, I don't know if you kids know anything about melanoma, not melanoma, but what was the disease they had? The women had pregnancies and kids were born with deformed hands. I can't remember that now, but anyway, he had that and his hair was scraggy and he had worn out boots. But there was a truck parked out in the yard and it said, "Higher powered" on it. This is God working in my life, right? Higher powered. So I had to make a decision, and I asked him, I said, "Who owns that truck?" And he says, "I do." I go, "Oh." So I have to make a decision right then and there. If I was going to break my anonymity, or was I going to be not feeling well that night, because I'm staying in a hotel on Century Boulevard. So that night, he took me to a meeting in Torrance, California. And I tell you that story because that was the second thing I think I did right in my life, break my anonymity to this future employee of mine. So we finally moved the terminal out to Santa Fe Springs, Whittier out, and it thrived. We did very well, very well. Long and the short of it is the people in Fullerton and Whittier, La Habra, and La Mirada, that's where I was going to meetings. They knew my plight because I was honest and I shared with them. They put their arms around me and they showed me a love that I had never experienced before in my life. They really did. And, I think about those times back there, and that was the foundation. Because I went out to California with like 5 months of sobriety. Imagine my screech fingers on the chalkboard. I was scared shitless, and that's why I broke my anonymity. So, what has happened and what it's like today? What happened was that I worked for BDR for a couple of years, and then I got this line on MRI trailers and moving them around. And so I took a chance. I went into business. I bought 3 tractors on credit cards, down payments off 3 of my credit cards. I got the customers, and I went out and went into business for myself. Now, I couldn't have done any of this had I not been sober. See, I would have to sit there for hours and talk to God and ask Him, what am I doing? What am I doing? Give me an answer. And it worked out well. It worked out well. And my company became a success. All during this time, though, I'm growing in AA. And and finally I bought a house up in Tehachapi, California. And I would commute down 4 days a week to work because I could do a lot of it at my office at home. I became very active in AA in Tehachapi and sponsored a lot of men. To me, the most important things that happened to me during this transition time, since when I finally got serious about being sober in Keene, what happened was God answered my prayer. He answered my prayer. I saw that truck. The next Friday I was there. And I got the job. Actually, I worked for free. I offered I'll work for free for a month, for a week, so I can get a note. I was so scared I didn't know what I was doing. But he answered my prayer. I got the job. Ironically enough, I got a sponsor, Teamster. He was on the other side of it when I got to California. And the other thing I wanted to say was, there was 3 things that are so important to us in Alcoholics Anonymous. If you want to stay sober, and if you want to have what we have, with probably not having to go through the bullshit that a lot of us old-timers have had to go through, think about this. Think about reconnecting to a higher power, and it can be any higher power you want. Number 2, you talk to God every day. I recommend the 3rd step prayer to anybody in here. It's a great way to start your day off. You go to meetings. You go to meetings. You'd sit at a bar for 2 or 3 hours. Why not go to a meeting, you know? And you feel better after you come out. Oh, yeah, I forgot to tell you, I'm very patriotic. I love the red, white, and blue, except when they're flashing behind me. So that's a part of that one. You know, you go to meetings because that's where you belong, and that's where you're going to meet people. You're going to meet people who have been there, done that, and bought the T-shirt. We all know what you're going through. I know what everybody in here has gone through, except for that old buck, because he's got more sobriety than I have. But anyway, and do some service work. You know, to get involved in your AA program. You get a place you go to and on a regular basis and do things like show up. That's being of service, showing up, because if you showed up to an empty room, what the hell would it matter? You show up. You're there to support the new people coming into this group. It's so important. It's just so important. You do those 3 things, and you ask God for help on a daily basis, and I guarantee you that day you most likely will stay sober. You don't have to live the way you have been living. You don't have to take a drink anymore. It's your choice. You know, if you don't want to drink, we're here to help you. But if you do want to drink, we can't help you. But we can be here for you when you come back, as you will do. As you will do. You want to build yourself a life of happiness? You can do it. Don't drink, take a drug, and live to be helpful to other people. That's the key, and I'm going to stick by it. Thank you.